For a deeper dive, let's bring in George Beebe. He is the former director of Russia analysis for the CIA and served as an advisor on Russia to former Vice President Dick Cheney. George is also the author of The Russia Trap: How Our Shadow War with Russia Could Spiral into Catastrophe. George, it's good to have you with us. So Moscow is now warning the U.S. of, quote, unpredictable consequences over weapons shipments to Ukraine. Do you believe that Russia is likely to actually take action against the U.S.? And if so, what might that look like?
Well, I'm sure that it's not their top priority to take military action against the United States. That would obviously involve some tremendous dangers for both the United States and Russia of escalation. But I do think that we need to take this warning seriously. The Russians have a good track record of following through on their warnings. And if the next phase of this military campaign, where the Russians are focusing on eastern Ukraine, proves to be as unsuccessful as the first phase of this war, I think they're going to be under a lot of pressure militarily, and those weapon supplies from the United States and NATO to Ukraine will prove to be very tempting targets. So I think we need to take this warning seriously.
What do you think, how do you assess a cyber attack as potential retaliation? Do you think that that's likely going to be seen as Moscow as a way to hit back at the United States without necessarily escalating things militarily?
Well, probably not in retaliation for weapon supplies. Cyber attacks are not a particularly effective weapon in disrupting those convoys. However, I think cyber attacks could come in the context of retaliation for U.S. economic sanctions against Russia. The United States has imposed some quite severe sanctions on Russia. Over time, those are likely to have an increasingly detrimental effect on the Russian economy. And as this war drags on, if it drags on, I think the Russians are going to come under more and more pressure to retaliate against the U.S. economy, and cyber attacks are actually one of the best ways of doing that for them.
I'm just ruminating on what you were saying before, George, when you said that Russia tends to follow through with its threats. They also call these weapon shipments into Ukraine legitimate targets. So far, they haven't attacked any, but some of these routes actually involve NATO countries. What would happen if Russia did target a weapons shipment, particularly if it was outside of Ukraine?
Well, I think that would put a lot of pressure on the United States and NATO to retaliate, while at the same time not wanting to escalate into a direct U.S. or NATO military confrontation with the Russians, which would be fraught with all kinds of dangers. But there's no question that we could not let that pass without some sort of very strong response. I would imagine that there are people in the White House, State Department, and Pentagon who are actually considering those retaliatory options right now.
George, you're among many experts who say that the war in Ukraine is not going the way that many Russian leaders and military commanders thought that it would. What do you think is the biggest thing that has gone wrong for Vladimir Putin?
Well, I think the Russians made a fundamental error in believing at the outset of this war that they wouldn't face very serious Ukrainian resistance. I think the conduct of their campaign, where they didn't really bring the kind of firepower to bear on the battlefield that they have in their arsenal, suggests that they didn't feel that the Ukrainians would resist all that resolutely. I think they probably expected that Zelensky and the Ukrainian leadership would flee, and the Russians really didn't need to plan for much more than an occupation. That obviously is not what happened. And the Russians have found themselves in a much more serious military confrontation than I think they had expected. I think they're regrouping. They're learning some lessons from the first phase. They're now concentrating their forces in a part of Ukraine where they might well have some advantages over the Ukrainians, and certainly an easier task of logistical support for their forces, which is one area where they really fell short in the first phase of this war.
All right. George Beebe, thank you.
Thank you.